alone. And signing up and becoming a part of this community is very important, because as I've traveled around, and I guess I'm very fortunate to be able to travel around and see that we aren't alone. We are the majority, actually. And that's why the other folks have to work so hard to suppress information, to isolate individuals, to make you think that you're an island unto yourself. But honestly, we are the majority. We have to start acting like it, though.
That's right. That's right. Any other questions there? Some more questions? Hey, Mike?
I think there's a general consensus that the rule of law is not working. And there might be a general consensus that the forces of evil, if I could use that term, will not voluntarily divest themselves of power. And there's probably also a consensus that we collectively do not believe in, or do believe in, nonviolence, et cetera, principles. So in light of all of that, at what point do conscientious, ethical thinking citizens decide that they have to abandon nonviolence in this struggle?
Well, the civil rights movement, which I kind of use as a gauge, civil rights movement in the United States, who was that that just recently said that it was nonviolent? It might have been President Obama, which shows how little he knows about the civil rights movement in the United States, because there was plenty of violence. I spoke to one Republic of New Africa activist who best responded to this question, and so I will give you his response. And that is that we have to meet the enemy where the enemy is. We have to meet our opposition where our opposition is. And that then means that we might have to meet them in the streets. We might have to meet them in the suites. We might have to meet them in the classroom. And we might have to meet them on the battlefield.
That's right.
But we have to meet them where they are. And if we look at the ANC and the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, it wasn't won because of the benevolent Boers. It was won because the ANC defeated the forces of apartheid militarily.
Right.
They lost the peace. They lost the peace. If I would draw your attention to the remarks of Winnie Mandela that she made either today or yesterday, which I think are quite poignant and right on point. But that was a military defeat for the greatest powers in the world that were supporting apartheid South Africa. I think that, I mean, you know, these people are not nonviolent, although they do have more bullets than we do. And they have more ink than we do, too. And so that's why we have to be smarter and more organized and united.
Well, I'll add something to that. Over the years, I have always tried to use intellectual, nonviolent, peaceful methods. But there is also, after analyzing given situations, there have been a number of times where I understood that the military complex acted on behalf of the state or the province, state in the U.S., province here in Canada. Two cases in point. 1974, I was on trial. I was accused of killing a cop at in Attica at the age of 19, Attica State Prison. I was 19 years old. I was the only man ultimately convicted for being, for any charge out of Attica in 1971. 1975, I was out on bail. William Kunstler, who was a famous civil rights attorney, was my lawyer. And Ramsey Clark represented my co-defendant, who was a young guy by the name of Charles Pernasolis. While we were out, there was a group of Mohawks in upstate New York, led by a man by the name of Louis Hall, who was one of the great contemporary warriors of our times back then. And he headed the war societies. He was considered the father of the modern day war societies. So he reinstituted the war structures of the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, while I was on bail, I was one of the original 400 Mohawks that went back up to Ganyonge to reclaim 4,000 acres of land that was stolen by the Rockefeller family. Now, we went up there in the middle of the night. It was an old Girl Scout camp that had been abandoned, so we went in there, we seized all of the barracks that were used by the Girl Scouts, and we turned them into our bunkers, and we fortified ourselves. But when we went up there, we understood when the leaders of that particular insurrection, Louis Hall and a few other Mohawks, said, well, maybe we don't want to go up there because maybe they're going to do to us what they did to the brothers at Attica. 43 people were killed in the retaking of the prison. 80 people were wounded. I had a gun pointed right in my face. The guy pulls the trigger, the state trooper, the clip fell out. I should have been a dead man. Well, they knocked me across the face with the butts of their guns. They picked me up and they threw me 40 feet down off the catwalk, and I almost broke my back on the handball court. And I watched, at the age of 19, I watched human beings being ripped apart. I watched heads being blown off. I watched state troopers sticking guns up people's asses and blowing their balls out, sticking guns down their throat and blowing their guns out, calling people all kind of niggers in the world. I heard screaming and killing going on all around me. 80 people wounded and maimed, 43 dead, including 11 hostages of their own. At 19 years old, it told me, coming through that this is the only way that they maintain power. And that's the way the state will always maintain power. At that point, I began to believe in an eye for an eye. I began to believe that as if I ever got out, when I got out, that if I ever engaged these people, that I would engage them on equal terms. I learned how to use arms when I got out. I learned to use it for my own protection, so that it would never be a one-sided situation again, as long as I had an equalizer. Well, it just so happens that 400 of us went up there to Ganyonge, but they made a decision to take back that land because some of the older people that were there before I got up there said, well, we're going to take back that land. We're not going to worry about it because they won't invade us because of what they did killing them people, those brothers at Attica. So they'll be afraid to do the same thing to us up there. So, and they were right, because they didn't want that to happen. Again, we as people have peace in our hearts. And but we also have the right to defend our families and our properties against those thieves and murderers that have no soul or no conscience. All they have is greed as their motivations. So we took back 4,000 acres of land, and here's the real ironic part. We strategically positioned ourselves, and we always said we will never engage or start a firefight, but we will defend ourselves and let them know that we are there to defend that land and take back what was stolen. There was an incident that happened all of a sudden. That night, there's 1,200 state